Welcome in to Stop the Takes, a football podcast focused on getting back to just talking ball. I'm Dakota, and that is Austin, and today is our inaugural episode. And what better way to do that than with a mock draft Monday, the week of the NFL draft? How are we feeling, man?
Dude, feeling great. It's draft season. I was just telling you the other day, we're college football fans and NFL fans, and that means draft season is the best season for us, dude. It marries the two together, so I'm ready for this draft.
Absolutely, yeah, that was such a spot on take because we've always been huge fans of the draft. So other fans out there that love college football and the NFL equally, this is the best time of the year. We can all be hopeful for our teams and then become depressed again right when the season comes back around. Uh,
Exactly.
so before we dive into this, man, what are your let's do a little high level. What are your thoughts on this class overall, and then specifically, what do we expect to see here in the first round? As that's what we'll be focusing on today.
I think generally speaking, it's a class that is deep but lacks blue chip players, right? We'll get to that once we start drafting, but right around the Jets at 7 is when I'm like, oof, no more blue chip guys, and it feels bad for those teams that are drafting in the top 10 that will not come away with one of those blue chip players. Like last year's draft, I mean, blue chip guys all throughout the top 10, really up until like the top 15. I mean, Brock Bowers went 13 last year. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of blue chip guys last year, kind of lacking this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were just talking about that. Once you hit that spot, there's a lot of guys I think we both agree in the teens you would love to have them, but some of them in the top 10 feels a little weird this year. Before we dive into things, just want to get a couple notes out there. We will probably reference Check the Mic with Steve and Sam quite a bit on this show. They're kind of an inspiration for why we're doing this, and they are some of the best NFL content out there. So if you've not listened to them, little plug for them. Formerly PFF guys, now with the 33rd team. And in speaking of PFF, we will be using the PFF NFL mock draft sim today. We both utilize PFF data a good bit, and this sim is pretty solid. With that in mind, their rankings are a bit different. Trevor Sikkema kind of handles those. They're a little different than what the consensus, the rest of the league and media think. So we do have the NFL mock draft database, consensus big board that kind of collects all the media and buzz from around the NFL in terms of how these guys are ranked. So we will also be doing trades. We'll see how many of those happen, but we at least have them as an
Excited for that.
option for us to figure this out. And we will be alternating picks. So I will have all the odd teams, and Austin will have all of the even. So that'll make things a little interesting as well. All right, you ready to get into this?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, pulling up the mock right now. Here we go.
All right, let's go, baby. Mock
All
time.
right, so let's kick this thing off. Start the draft. Tennessee Titans are on the clock. Gotta go and get this out of the way. I am a Titans fan.
He
So
is.
and he'll get to his team. I'll let him handle that. But I am a Titans fan. Want to make this pick quick because there's not spending too much time on what we all know is going to happen. We are planning to try to wear our own GM hat for all these picks, so kind of hard to not be predictive with that, but kind of focused on what we would do for each of these teams as GM. I think there's two options: you draft Cam Ward or you trade down. Anything else would feel pretty rough. But with the fact that the trade buzz has died out, and when the Titans in 2016 traded back with the Rams, and 2 years ago, when the Panthers traded up for Bryce Young, they happened in March and early April. So most likely, trade's not happening.
Yeah.
So you've got to do what you got to do to try to build this franchise. Move on from Will Levis. You did what you could last season, and you just got to take Cam Ward, the best quarterback in this class.
I agree with that assessment. Also, to your point about the trade, that's typically how trading for the first overall pick works. I mean, we just saw that with Bryce and the Panthers, right? You know, they traded like a month before the draft with the Bears. So if a trade was going to happen, it would probably already happen by now. And honestly, I don't think the Titans want to trade, dude. Like, I think teams would probably be interested, especially the Giants at this point would probably still be interested in that pick. But I think the Titans are locked in on Cam Ward, dude. They've already built that relationship with them, and they need their franchise guy, dude. They need a franchise quarterback after Will Levis didn't work out. And you don't get to, that's one thing, dude. You do not get to pick number one overall very often, right? I mean, this is probably going to be the last time they pick number one overall for quite a while. So you got to take the opportunity to get your franchise guy.
Absolutely, yeah. Hopefully, it's the last time for a while they pick number one overall, but we'll see.
Yeah.
So we will do it. Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami, goes to the Titans, which now puts the Cleveland Browns up on the clock.
All right, man. This is an interesting pick. For the longest time, I thought this was going to be Abdul Carter, and I like that option, man. Pairing Abdul Carter with Myles Garrett, I really like that option. But honestly, dude, I think you got to go Travis Hunter. That's where I'm going to go with this because, I mean, literally one of the most interesting prospects we've seen in a very long time. Two-way player in college, did it full-time receiver and cornerback. Two, honestly, positions of need for the Browns as well, especially receiver. They could really use an X receiver. And listen, dude, I just think he is such a unique prospect that if you have an opportunity to take a guy like that, you should probably do it. The other option for the Browns would probably be quarterback. You know, I mean, the Shedeur debate. They could easily take Shedeur, but my thought process with that is if you don't believe Shedeur is an elite prospect, then I just would not take that risk because Travis Hunter's right there, and this is a generational prospect as far as just what he is, right? You know, two-way player. Haven't seen that in literally generations. So, yeah.
I completely agree. I think at one point I would have probably been in the same boat with Abdul Carter, but Travis Hunter is such a unique prospect, and especially with some of the guys we'll dive into later, we're like, how much do they love ball is that question and stuff like that. And this dude basically saying like, I want to play everything or nothing is a good mentality, honestly, of a guy that just wants to be on the field making plays. And I think, I think Cleveland's a good fit because he could play either position there. I think, I think playing him at corner full time and then putting packages in on offense may be the best fit because it's kind of hard to do the inverse of that. But who knows? That is up for that coaching staff to figure out. But I think it's a good pick, and you get arguably the best player in the draft from just a overall skill set perspective.
It's interesting though, man. More teams are talking about playing him at receiver full time and giving him packages at corner. But I generally agree with you that it is a lot easier to get third down packages as a wide receiver. But at the end of the day, man, he's also like kind of bust proof, right? Because if you play him at full time receiver and he doesn't work, well, just try him at corner in 2 years, right? And that's what makes him so interesting as well. But yeah, man, I think whether you play him full time receiver, full time corner, or part time, one or the other, I still would take Travis Hunter.
I like it. Travis Hunter, second overall corner / wide receiver from Colorado, goes to the Browns, which now puts the New York Giants on the clock, which is kind of where things get a little more interesting. So here's a tough thing. We've talked extensively about, the GM mindset when it comes to building a team. You need a franchise quarterback. And in terms of being a little predictive here, Joe Schoen had, a comment recently that was kind of like, of course, every GM wants a young franchise quarterback, but the value has to be there. And I kind of agree with that. I think that's where I sit with Shedeur. I don't know if I feel great taking him third overall. But the unfortunate part is, as the GM, you're going to be tied to him regardless now. You either draft him, and if he doesn't work out, it's on you for making the wrong pick, or you don't pick him. Let's say he goes to, wherever else, Saints, Steelers, the common places he's going, and then balls out. Looks like Jaden Daniels is the second QB off the board, plays fantastic. You may still be getting canned, even if you go like 7-10 or 8-9 this season, because you didn't draft that guy. So that's kind of my thoughts on Shedeur. I think because of that and just not being as high on him, I think that you just take the best player available here, pair him. Kayvon Thibodeau has been okay, not top 5 pick worthy. Brian Burns is still solid. I don't think he's still been quite as good as you would have expected after the contract they gave, after trading for him. So I think Abdul Carter is the pick here.
I agree, dude. I don't think Thibodeau's stopping you from drafting a guy like Abdul Carter. Yeah, man, the Giants are in kind of a rough spot. They tried to trade up last year for Drake May. That was the rumors. They wanted to trade up for Drake May. And Drake May looked really good his rookie year. So it's unfortunate that the year that they wanted to trade up to get their franchise guy, they just couldn't make it happen. And that's going to cost them in the long run, dude, because they cannot afford, they really can't afford another losing season. And I think the goal for the Giants this year is, hey, hopefully Russ can get us to 9 wins, draft Abdul Carter, get the best player available in there, and maybe the defense will just carry us to 9 wins. And Russ and Malik Neighbors, who knows how that's going to work out. But so yeah, I agree with you, dude. I would definitely take Abdul in this situation, and it just depends on it depends on your Shadur evaluation. If you think Shadur is that guy, and you think he could potentially become an elite quarterback, then I would take him at 3. But if you don't, then I would take best player available.
Completely agree. And I think, putting my GM hat on in their current state, right, where they have signed Jameis Winston, signed Russell Wilson, not that they're like the guy they're going to go with future state-wise, right, but having 2 kind of bridge quarterbacks, one on a 2-year deal that could be the backup next season, kind of tells me that they're committed to that at this point too. So with that in mind, Giants take best player available, grab Abdul Carter, edge rusher out of Penn State, which now puts the Patriots on the clock at 4.
Man, the Patriots are interesting because they need a lot of stuff, right? I think they would like to have this pick in last year's draft with the loaded receiver class to get Drake May a receiver. And it's not the best tackle class either. There's a lot of question marks with these tackles. But ultimately, I think the best tackle available is Will Campbell. You had that whole debacle with his arm length. His arms were like 32 inches at his pro day. And then he went, at the combine. Then he got them measured at the pro day. And now they're 33 inches at the pro day. And that's like that inch differences between him being a guard or a tackle. But ultimately, I think he's the best tackle in this class. And I think you have to protect Drake May. Like, you have to, man. He was under an insane amount of pressure last year. And it, like, having terrible O-line play will make an offense just completely not function. And you'll never get to that potential of Drake May if you don't have a solid offensive line. Or you could have an Andrew Luck situation where the offensive line is so bad for so many years that he gets so many injuries that he just gives up on football because he's so sick of being hurt. So you have to get the O-line in order. And they did a little bit in free agency, but not enough, right? They just didn't do enough. So it's going to have to be Will Campbell here, in my opinion.
I think I would tend to agree. And it's interesting because, the arm length debacle and then his wingspan too apparently got shorter after the combine from his pro day. And apparently, I think Mike Renner, former PFF guy as well, was talking about how his wingspan, I think, would be like the shortest ever at tackle in the NFL. But it's one of those things, where like, how much data is there even there? It's like looking at like car accidents in 1880. Like, if the car didn't exist yet, you're not going to have any data on it. So like, if you're not putting guys out there with that length, you don't really know. So I think, the tape speaks for itself with him. I think he's clearly the best offensive lineman in this class in general. And I think, to your point, like, to be honest, they could also play him at guard.
Exactly.
It's a little tough picking a guard 4th overall, but like, to your point with Travis Hunter, if you pick him and if he's not good at tackle, bump him inside, and he's probably still going to be your best offensive lineman. So
exactly, like I was just about to say that, dude, because you don't like to draft a guard in the top 5, but it is nice to have that versatility. Okay, if he sucks at tackle, just play him at guard, dude. Just play him inside, and I think he will. I think his floor in the NFL is a solid NFL guard. So that's like, I know that doesn't sound great as a 4th overall pick. Okay, your floor is a solid NFL starting guard. But honestly, that's what the Patriots need, all right? They just need to rebuild that O-line any way possible. And, his ceiling is, okay, he can play left tackle. And, that's a really good ceiling. So, yeah, I think Will Campbell is the play. And, it's like one of those picks the Patriots could trade down and collect draft capital, but I would rather just guarantee, hey, get the best O-lineman in the draft.
Fully agree. Got to protect Drake May. So Will Campbell, tackle, LSU, 4th overall to the Patriots. Puts the Jags on the clock. So things get a little interesting here. I think, backpedaling a little bit, I think 3 could start to see some trade stuff open up. Like Will Anderson, when he got traded up for 2 years ago by the Texans, I think it would be interesting to see a team try to move up for Abdul Carter, like the Panthers or something. So that could definitely happen. And now at 5, I think we may end up with a chalky first 5 because
It could.
my logic here, yeah, as putting on my Jags hat, I think interior pass rush is becoming a bit more valuable and maybe just less underrated. Because if you look at guys like Chris Jones, and then obviously Aaron Donald, who's one of the best defense players ever, having guys like that that can wreck on the inside is super valuable. And edge is obviously important, but I think a good use case for having interior rush to make your edge look better is Harold Landry as a Titans fan. His pass rush win rate, all of those, those statistics not very good. Like all things considered, he's not necessarily a great pass rusher, but he's been around Jeffrey Simmons, Tier Tart, Danico Autry, Tavondre Sweat. He's had guys in the interior wreaking havoc who then force you into, getting sacks, which funnily enough, there was a Will Campbell clip I saw that where he was, against Alabama, where he did his job and then Nussmeier goes to spin out to the left and it's a sack. And it's because the center got absolutely blown up. So having also taken a shot on Taven Bryan a few years back to try to fix their interior D-line, they still haven't quite figured it out. I think Mason Graham, get one of the other blue chip guys in this class and just pair him with Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, and I think you're feeling pretty good.
I totally agree with that, dude. You made a good point about having, hey, your edge rushers get better when you have a great interior player. You saw that with Leonard Floyd with the Rams, dude. That's the name that came to mind with me. When he played for the Rams, dude, he had like 9-10 sack seasons because Aaron Donald was causing so many issues up front and in the interior. So, and dude, that all of a sudden becomes a very scary defensive line when you have Mason Graham and Josh Allen. And you still have Trayvon Walker, see what he's going to develop into. He hasn't lived up to the number 1 overall pick hype, but he's starting to get the sack numbers, and who knows, he could still develop. He still has the tools. So yeah, all of a sudden the Jags defensive line is looking really good when you add Mason Graham. As far as a potential trade, as the GM for the Bears right now, I would love to potentially trade up for that 5th pick for Ashton Jeanty, potentially. I kind of like that as a potential in the draft, man. I think the Jags won't do it, but I could definitely see the Bears wanting to trade up and jump the Raiders here. But ultimately, what I think is going to happen in the draft and what I think should happen is Mason Graham to the Jags. He's the last blue chip player. Outside of Jeanty, he's the last blue chip player at a pretty valuable position. So I like locking that kind of guy up in the top 5.
I could definitely see the trade. I think you're right. Even just wearing my own hat, I would feel like passing on one of the blue chip guys, especially in a position where you've needed help, would be a little rough. But obviously, getting draft capital, depending on what the deal is, the new young GM and Jacksonville could feel a little bit different about that. But yeah, I think, and also, doing Mason Graham also is a weird way of kind of like reinforcing one of your other first round picks, because to your point, like Trayvon did get better. And if you add a guy like this to the interior, then you're helping his job out even more. So he can become a little bit more valuable for you. So I think the Jags grab another blue chip out of this draft, Mason Graham, add to that interior pass rush, D-line out of Michigan.
I like it.
Do it.
I
The
like
Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders are now on the clock at 6.
Listen, this is interesting because it's hard not to be predictive here. The Raiders GM just came out and was asked about running back value, and he went on a tangent about how, he doesn't understand why we stopped devaluing running backs, and he pointed to Saquon Barkley and what he did for the Eagles, which you knew GMs around the league were going to do that. Right when Saquon had his insane season last year, people were going to point to that was the difference on the Eagles team, which I agree. Saquon absolutely made a difference on that team. But we've talked about off air before we started the show, a guy like Saquon doesn't work unless you have an elite offensive line for him to run behind. And I don't think the Raiders have that. I think they have a solid offensive line. Out of these top 10 teams, I think they have one of the better offensive lines in the top 10. But I'm not convinced that Ashton Jeanty would be a needle mover for the Raiders. I think he's a needle mover for other teams. And I might be drafting for those other teams. That might impact me a little bit. But outside, there's also, it's kind of like the Jets position we were talking about earlier, dude. It's like if you don't draft Jeanty, then it's like, who do you take with the 6th pick? So that's why I think I'd like a trade if we could potentially trade
Okay.
between the Raiders and my Bears because I have to see Ben Johnson get Ashton Genty. So yeah, if we could get a trade fired up, I don't know what the trade would look like, or if we could even make it happen. Can we make this happen?
Oh yeah, I can force it.
Okay, good deal. Because man, I just listen. I think the
Well,
Raiders need so much, right? They need so much on that team. They still don't have a great defense. They don't have great weapons on offense. Like they really need receiver, but I just don't love. Like I don't love sticking and picking and taking Ted McMillan. So if I'm the GM for the Raiders, I like trading down.
I like that a lot. It has become an incredibly chalky first 6 with Genty going at 6 there. But I completely agree. And like having watched, a lot of people this past season pointed to Derrick Henry and Saquon and all these guys going to new teams and how good they were there and how running backs are so valuable. But they went to teams with better offensive lines. Like the reason Saquon struggled in New York is because the offensive line was terrible. The reason Derrick Henry struggled in Tennessee is because the offensive line was terrible. So, inserting a running back to fix your to fix your run game when your offensive line is not great is just probably just not the most efficient way to handle it. So I like this. We're not going to get too in the weeds on the capital here. I guarantee. I mean, at the very minimum, they're going to probably pick up one of these picks and potentially a future third or something. But
that's another part of it too, Dakota, is the reason I like to make this trade is because the Bears have 2 second-round picks, right? So using one of those second-round picks to come up, or even a third-round pick, but they have extra capital from that Bryce Young trade. So yeah, man, I still really like this for the Bears' perspective, to be honest. And I guess I'll talk about it from the Bears' perspective right now because, dude, adding Ashton Genty to Caleb Williams and all those weapons for the Bears with Ben Johnson, who, listen, we all know the Lions offense took another step forward when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. At the time, me and you were saying, what are they doing? 12th overall, Jahmyr Gibbs? But, dude, the way Ben Johnson used an elite running back like that, I think the same could be said for Genty when he goes here. So, yeah, man, I just love this for the Bears.
I think it's cool. I think it's a fascinating thing. Having the 2 second-round picks, you're in the second year of your QB. Now is the time to just build around them.
Yep.
And what Ben Johnson did in Detroit. I think this would be a fascinating thing on draft night where you and I are both, we kind of just talked into that of like running back value, where that is. This would probably be the only scenario of somebody trading up for Genty where I'm like, you know what? I actually like that.
Yeah, because also think about that Bears O-line, dude. That Bears O-line is actually starting to look really good. What they did in the offseason, trading for Joe Thuney and Darnell Wright, VFL, fans of this podcast don't know yet, but we're both huge Tennessee Vols fans. Darnell Wright has turned into a pretty good player. So, yeah, I really like the way their offensive line is looking. And, again, you pair him with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. I think that could be dangerous.
Love it. All right. So, Bears trade up from 10 to 6 to draft Ashton Genty, running back from Boise State. Now, the Jets are on the clock at 7, and the first 6 picks are still like the same, but just with a different team for what the consensus typically has been. Here's where things start to get really interesting. As we just talked about, all the blue chip guys that we would consider blue chip are kind of gone now.
Yep.
And this is where things are a little tough because the Jets are in an interesting position. I think there's a lot of different ways they could go. And to be completely honest, I am not quite as high on Ted McMillan as Trevor is here, having him as his 3rd overall player. And for reference, where does the consensus board has him at 11 now? So this would still, be a little ahead of where his range is. It's hard not to get comparative with previous drafts, but like drafting a guy like him 2 picks after like a Jamar Chase just feels rough. And I know you need to look at them in vacuums and not do that, but yeah, I think there's 2 different routes I kind of want to go. So the Jets lost DJ Reed, so they have a gap at their second cornerback position, and their offensive line is still a bit tough. And I think I would have gone in a different direction here had the Jets gotten a different quarterback as their bridge quarterback, but then bringing in Justin Fields. A lot of people like to think that mobile QBs like that help offensive lines. but a lot of them make it worse.
Yeah.
And he is an example of that.
Yes,
he is an example of a guy, and Caleb is too. The Bears drafted a back-to-back, but he is an example of a guy that can make a bad offensive line look even worse. So with that in mind, I think to really evaluate this season for them, I think they need to reinforce that offensive line. And so with that in mind, I think my gut, as the GM of the Jets would be leaning, let's grab Armand Minbu, get the second best tackle in this class. Let's protect Justin Fields so we can see what he can do. We signed him to a 2-year deal. Let's see what he can do, and give him that protection so he can help us out.
I agree with you, dude. I think you have to give Fields protection, or else that could get ugly really quickly. Especially since no one's going to be open. They don't really have receivers right now either. I think in an ideal world you would trade down, but you have to keep in mind you're not going to be able to trade down every time. There's not always going to be trade
Right.
partners looking for this pick, and I really don't think there's going to be any teams looking to trade up right here, unless like the Saints wanted to trade up to guarantee drafting Shadur to make sure the Steelers don't pass them up, something of that nature, something wonky like that. But I don't think there's a blue chip guy right here that someone would be, oh, we need to go up and get that guy. So ultimately, I kind of agree with this. Like, hey, let's just beef up the O line, even though we did take it last year. I think if the Jets could go back last year, they'd probably go and take Brock Bowers instead, right? Maybe last season goes differently. And you know, Fashanu could still work out. I'm not saying his career is just done; it's over. But they still need. I mean, heck, they could probably use both tackles, right? Fashanu and Minbu could go in and start.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, I like that.
Yeah, right now they got Carter Warren at right tackle. No idea who that is.
Yeah, I
Not to
don't
show my own knowledge, but I don't know who that is. So that's looking pretty rough. So yeah, I think their trades here are interesting because, you know, if we look at the big board, one thing we will say is that PFF is way lower on Jalen Walker than the consensus. Consensus has Jalen Walker at 10. He has him at 24. So that would be the type of guy. It is, and that's the type of guy somebody could trade up in front of the Panthers to grab.
Sure.
Is because a lot of people chalk that, but with this edge class, it's really hard to predict that, and I don't love any of them enough either to try to do that with any of my teams behind them. So I think I draft Marmon Minbu, tackle from Missouri, protect Justin Fields for the 2 seasons we got him, lock up both tackles, and go from there.
I agree. And you know, it's difficult too, because when we're talking about these trade scenarios, we're the GM of every team right now. So we also have to like it from the team's perspective that's trading up. And so that's,
Exactly.
you know, that's kind of tough. But yeah, we got the Panthers up here, which, listen, dude, I think the Panthers is pretty obvious. It's defensive line. Now, when we first went into the draft process, I'm thinking, well, they could take a receiver. They still really need receiver help. But listen, dude, they desperately need pass rush, like desperately. And it's a loaded pass rush class. So from this perspective, now, like you said, the chalk pick has been Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker's 10th on the consensus. But the guy I'm going to take is 17th on the consensus board. I think the second best pass rusher in the class is Mike Green from Marshall. Mike Green, obviously, listen, didn't play in the toughest division in college football, which is going to be one of his biggest question marks coming out. But dude, he was dominant, and he dominated in games outside of the weak conference as well. I mean, he had a really good game against Ohio State. So, you know, he showed good play against good competition. And I think he is the second most dominant pass rusher, of course, outside of Abdul Carter in this class.
I like that. Yeah, I think this edge class is really interesting because, you know, there are a lot of good players in this class. A lot of guys. Gosh, I didn't realize how low he is on Kel Williams as well, down at 38. So
38.
Trevor, not a fan.
Wow.
Trevor is not a fan of the Georgia guys because, for reference, a lot of mocks have either Mikel or Jalen Walker going 8th overall, and he has him 24 down. So Mike Green is a really interesting prospect because, yeah, like people talk about it a lot. That Marshall on his helmet is probably swaying things a bit. But he also had, you know, the like one dominant rep at the Senior Bowl where he just obliterated Josh Connerly and then left, peaced out, said, "That's who I am. I'm out." So I think, I mean, I like that pick, dude. I think it's he. You know, he has some potential, you know, red flags, but every single guy we're going to talk about from an edge perspective does. But I think that's the position you got to address if you're the Panthers. You've got to get somebody in there, and he could be one of the higher upside guys that could come in and fix that situation.
Now, I think we have to talk about a potential trade in this spot as well. The potential trade I talked to you before we got on air was the Steelers. Listen, I think it's pretty obvious. We all heard the Derek Carr news, right? Derek Carr is likely going to be out for the 2025 season, meaning the Saints are looking at starting Spencer Rattler. And as Tennessee fans, we know that's probably a huge mistake. So they don't want to start Spencer Rattler. So they're looking to probably draft a quarterback. Well, the Saints, or excuse me, the Steelers also don't have a quarterback. I think they were banking on Aaron Rodgers signing with them. Well, Aaron Rodgers is still yet to sign, and the last thing Aaron Rodgers said on Pat McAfee's show is that, hey, he's still trying to decide, which of course in classic Aaron Rodgers move, right? Like he can't tell the team before the draft, I'm not going to play. Like the team kind of needs to know that, pal. The team kind of needs to know if you're going to play or not. But yeah, man, I could easily see the Steelers wanting to trade up and go get Shedeur Sanders. If they believe Shedeur Sanders is their guy, you hop the Saints. And from the Panthers perspective, I love it. Typically, I always love trading down, right? That's always really no matter what, especially in a draft that lacks blue chip players. I actually love trading down for the Panthers perspective because then you pick up multiple picks and, you could get, receivers and edge at some point. And it's also a deep defensive line class. So that's a potential trade that I could possibly see happening on draft night.
Yeah, that is a very interesting one. And as the GM of both the Saints and the Steelers, I'm not entirely sure I know what I'm going to do yet still. But I think I'd feel a little rough for the Steelers because the Steelers are probably one of the worst positions when it comes to that. And we'll talk about it more in a second. They don't have a second round pick. They traded that for DK Metcalf. So you're already lacking capital to move up in the first place, but you're also lacking the capital to draft a quarterback in the second round if you skip in the first. So they are in a very tough situation where that is definitely something I've not seen mocked done, but could 100% happen if they become that desperate. If Aaron Rodgers officially says he's out, then they got to do something. You're going to overdraft the third guy most likely at 21, or you're drafting a third round guy and I guess running with Mason Rudolph until he makes you put the third round guy in.
Yeah, dude, it is not a good spot to be in, man. It is really not a good spot. I think they are kind of banking that Aaron Rodgers eventually signs with them, but if he doesn't, dude, and the Saints take Shedeur, I mean, the Steelers could be looking at, like you said, taking the third quarterback in the first round, and this class looks pretty rough this year. But ultimately, I think we're going Mike Green for the Panthers.
Yeah, Panthers grab edge rusher Mike Green out of Marshall. Second edge off the board. All right, with the Saints up.
Here we go. Shedeur
so
watch.
A part of me almost wants to do a crazy thing and just trade the Steelers to this pick where people would be like, that's kind of crazy that the Saints traded back. But
True.
This is a really tough position. So I think the Saints roster is still in a tough position. Oh man, I'm thinking through so many scenarios here. I've gone back and forth through the entire process of getting ready for the show, being in it. I've bounced back and forth about 4 times on who I think I'm going to take.
I think they'd love to see M'Boue drop to them. They could really use M'Boue with Ramczyk just retiring. But in this scenario, he doesn't. So, and I mean, they could take Ted McMillan here, but I don't know if I love that value. And if you're trying to win in 2025, you literally have to take a chance at a quarterback. Like you're either not trying to win in 2025 or you have to take a QB.
Literally. And I have Ted McMillan was the one I started to think about because I was like, I like Chris Olave, but the concussion stuff starting to catch up to him. His injury history is pretty rough. They could use a receiver. So that would be a play for like the future quarterback you're going to bring in next year if you do pass. And then, yeah, man, as the G, this is tough because my logic is the same. Like, Derek Carr's out. Like, I'm either going to have to take a shot on Shedeur here, or I am punting and I'm focusing on 2026,
which is a play.
And I think, I've gone back and forth because with Derek Carr, his cap hit next year in dead money, if you got rid of him after this season, would be about $60 million. And we, touched on this a little bit with the Browns. Like, if they did go Shedeur, you can't really do the second year QB thing with them that the Commanders are doing right now, that the Texans just did, where you can go all out in free agency. You can spend a lot of money, build around that rookie contract. Your hands are kind of tied when you have $60 to $80 million worth of cap hit to a guy that is either not on your team or is now your backup.
And a team who's already in cap trouble too.
Exactly. They've been like notorious as the team. And if people, for context on that, like they've been able to mitigate it for a while, but they're basically them pushing everything off to the future is over.
Yeah.
So now, after going back and forth, I think as the GM, I am 2026 is what I care about. Our QB got hurt.
Okay.
I have kind of an excuse as the GM in that instance anyway, where it's like, hey man, Derek Carr got hurt.
Yeah.
So
true.
Give me a pass. And I want to take Ted McMillan, build for our QB next season, whoever our QB is going to be next season. Raiders are probably feeling a little rough about that coming up on pick 10. But I think McMillan is the pick here.
That was 100%. As the GM of the Raiders, that was 100% the GM's plan, was to take Ted McMillan. But hey, listen, I respect it, because even if Chris Olave stays healthy, I mean, Chris Olave and Ted McMillan can play together. It's not like those skill sets.
And they're very different skill sets.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's not like those skill sets are overlapping in any way. So, I mean, that all of a sudden becomes an interesting, like a high-end ceiling receiving core, in my opinion, for a potential quarterback in 2026. Because trust me, the Saints are going to be fighting for the first overall pick if Spencer Rattler is the starting plan. So, yeah, man, as the GM of the Raiders, I'm pretty upset about this, but hey, I respect the pick.
As the GM of the Saints, I'm saying we've got our X potentially in Olave and or McMillan. They could kind of play both, but you'd probably move Chris to the Z at that point, put Olave at the Z. And then you have Rashid Shaheed as the field stretcher too. So I love that as a recruiting core. And we're going back full circle. Bring us Arch. We had Archie, so we're ready for Arch next season. That's what we're focusing on. We got to get him some receivers. So Ted McMillan, wide receiver, Arizona to the Saints at 9. Raiders now back on the clock.
For some reason, I didn't put that connection together between Arch and Archie, but I actually love that for the Saints if they can make that happen. Raiders are on the clock, and we are throwing stuff all over the war room right now because we are ticked that Ted McMillan just got taken. But hey, listen, we still need a lot of stuff. We still need a lot of players. And man, this is I could go in so many different directions here.
Oh yeah.
Cornerback is on my mind right now. You could really go corner. You could go Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron. I also wouldn't hate Walter Nolan in the situation. They need interior pass rush. That would be pretty high for Walter Nolan, but I could see that happening. But you know what? I think, man, as the GM, I don't know if I would do this though. You know what? I think I'm just going to go a safe pick, in my opinion. Jahdae Barron can really play all over the secondary. Is one of the, honestly, probably arguably the best player available in this spot. You could make an argument for Jalen Walker, but I would say they need a lot of secondary help. Pete Carroll is a defensive guy. I think he'll like Jahdae Barron and his skill set. So yeah, give me Jahdae Barron for the Raiders.
I like it. I like that his skill set, being able to kind of play across the secondary is huge, and they need all the help they can get. And just to touch on with Walter Nolan too, this is an example where Trevor's a little bit higher on somebody. So he's 8th here. You can see his ADP, his average draft position, is closer to his rank in the consensus, which is 29th. Which, the interior guys in this class are a little bit more interesting. I think it's more about who you love. I personally am a fan of Walter Nolan. I think, again, that interior pass rush has been underrated. But I think Jahdae Barron is a solid pick for the Raiders here. Fix that secondary, work on the defense, and get a guy who's got a pretty versatile skill set too.
And we're still ticked we missed that on Ted McMillan, but that's okay.
They're angrily putting in the card. All right. Yeah. Jahdae Barron, corner, Texas to the Raiders at 10. Now puts on the 49ers at 11. This is a bit of an interesting spot as well. I don't know who would be trade back worthy, unless somebody would want to come up for like a Jalen Walker or something, but I could see a trade back from the 49ers here to just accumulate a little even more picks because they have some gaps. as the GM, I'm feeling a little rough right now because I'd like to go offensive line. We need some offensive line help. Um,
Another
we've
team
got
that would love Mimbu to fall to them.
100% because like our right tackle is not great, but how do I feel about overdrafting? In my opinion, would be overdrafting Simmons or Banks here. I don't feel great about them at 11. This is a tough spot. So with that in mind, I think a part of me they could go in so many different directions. They
It
could go
could.
interior pass rush here. I feel like no matter who I pick, it's going to feel a little bit like a reach, just a little bit, because I think the three guys that I would have in my mind are Walter Nolan, that interior pass rush. They tried with Javon Kinlaw, right,
Yep.
out of South Carolina, drafted him really high from the trade of trading away DeForest Buckner, which was funny. So they got rid
Yeah.
of the guy who was a really good interior guy and then ended up missing. So they could use that help still. I like Will Johnson here a little bit as well after losing Travarius Ward to free agency. I kind of like
You
that pick a
could go
lot.
Will Johnson. Yeah.
They got some young guys in the secondary. And then it would be overdrafting one of these tackles, probably Banks. I like Banks a little bit more than I like Simmons.
They also
It's tough.
they have to future proof for Trent Williams at some point. Trent Williams isn't going to be around forever, so they're going to need a left tackle at some point. But dude, I mean, just looking at their defensive line depth, it's just gone, dude. I mean, it's Nick Bosa and friends at this point, right? It's Nick Bosa and a lot of guys who are just not proven NFL players yet. So I would be looking at D line personally. Whether it's interior or they could go edge, dude. I mean, you know what I really like for the Niners is Jalen Walker. If I was in your spot, I'd probably go Jalen Walker. You have that position versatility, but you also have a potential elite edge rusher. But I also really like that Walter Nolan shout, dude. I mean, that's why, honestly, Walter Nolan is lower on the consensus, but he'll probably go higher in our mock than what he's at on the consensus because so many of these teams need interior rush.
Definitely. And I like the Jalen Walker shout. I do. I think he'd be an interesting fit in this defense. This is so tough. I think more than likely I'd be trying to trade back, but like with my own other teams and everything, I just don't see a trade back that makes sense right now where somebody would be wanting to move up for somebody necessarily. I think, man, the Jalen Walker shout, that's tough because he could play a little bit of, we got D Winters at our other linebacker position with Fred Warner.
I think
I just feel
Sala
like the
would love
interior.
Walker.
I do. I think, unfortunately, I'm going to do what I don't love to do, which is draft a bit more for need. And I think I'm going to take Walter Nolan,
I like it.
interior D line from Mississippi.
I don't think Walter Nolan is too much of a reach. I think it's just the nature of this draft, dude. It's like all these guys are good prospects. They're not great. In past drafts, we've seen the 11th overall pick get a blue chip player. This draft is just not going to happen. It's just not going to fall that way. Unless somehow Mason Graham like falls. Honestly, the Niners could be a team that wants to trade up for Mason Graham. Just kind of thought of that. I could see that happening, but yeah, dude. I mean, that's just the kind of nature of these picks, dude. Everything's gonna feel like a little bit of a reach at this point.
It definitely. With that, the Cowboys are now on the clock at pick 12.
They are. And I'm the GM for the Cowboys, so that makes things interesting. What I think they will do, I think they will draft Matthew Golden. That's the name I keep hearing for the Cowboys. They need a second wide receiver. They really do. Or I've also heard Amarian Hampton. Now, I would not do that. Number 12 overall. Listen, I know we've already gotten burned from Jameer Gibbs at number 12 overall. It really worked out. Like, it worked out phenomenally, but I just wouldn't bank on that working out again. I really wouldn't. Especially since their offensive line has been depleted. They're kind of like a sneaky team to draft offensive line, in my opinion. But listen, dude, man, what will I do with this pick? That's the question. I think, man, this might be a little crazy. This might be where the draft starts to get a little insane. Because I'm the GM, okay?
Yep.
And this guy probably won't be drafted I mean, this guy could fall out of the first round at this point. But where I'm at, where I would rank these players, I would go James Pierce out of Tennessee, dude. I really would. I think he's the third best pass rusher in the class. I could see an argument for Jalen Walker, but I think if you take the off the field concerns out of the question with Pierce, right? The question mark with Pierce right now is, okay, does he love football? Does he want to work hard? Does he want to actually do this as a profession? That's kind of the question marks with Pierce. And I could see that from just the snap counts and things like that at Tennessee. But as far as talent is concerned, I think Pierce is a top 10 talent in this class. I really do. And pairing him with Micah Parsons, man, I mean, all of a sudden that becomes potentially the best defensive line in the NFL. So, yeah, give me James Pierce.
I love it. I do think it's going to be fascinating where he ends up going. We've talked about this a lot off the show of where he could go pretty much anywhere in the first round to not in it. And having watched pretty much his entire career in the snap stuff, we saw a little bit of the snap count stuff, load management, whatever was going on, and it's hard to know for sure what was going on there. Like, it's just speculation from our perspective. And the other thing we don't know, which is true to every single one of these picks, and with the predictive aspect of this, is when these guys get in the room with these teams, some of the teams just fall in love with the guy. That's probably why Jahmyr Gibbs went 12th overall, is that they met with him and they were like, we want this guy in our room and we will not let him not be there. So I think pairing that type of speed coming off the edge between him and Micah is pretty disgusting, having two guys like that. I think that, and again, with the edge rush, we talked about it. This edge class is very interesting. It's deep, but it's kind of interchangeable. It's kind of pick what you prefer out of these guys. And with who's on the board here, we've not talked about Shamar Stewart a lot, but you and I both, not a big fan of non-productive guys in college. The guy had like 4.5 sacks in his entire career. That's tough. And the analytics don't back that up from a pressure rate. So I think James Pierce, I think that would be a fascinating pick. And him and Micah together would be gross.
I agree. I think a lot of people would love to see Shamar Stewart go to the Cowboys just because he's an athletic freak like Micah. But so is James Pierce. Let's not forget the dude ran a 4.5 at his. I mean, for an edge rusher, 4.5, dude, that's pretty nuts. And you need a guy like that with Jaden Daniels in the division right now, chasing down a guy like Jaden Daniels. So yeah, I really like that Pierce pick to the Cowboys.
All right. James Pierce Jr., edge out of Tennessee, 12th overall to the Cowboys. Now, the Dolphins are on the clock. Ooh. And I'm going to tell you right now, as the GM of the Dolphins, I'm looking at our offensive line depth chart, and I am weeping. I am in tears because this is a disaster.
Especially with Armstead retiring.
Yes. So we quite literally, looking at our depth chart, we drafted Patrick Paul last season. He's currently slotted to start at left tackle. Yikes. Our right tackle is a rough situation with a guy we drafted in the first round a few years back, and Austin Jackson, who's never really been that good. This is a spot where my hand is tied that I talked about. I don't care for drafting the high lineman 2 picks ago, but my hands are tied. I have to draft for need right here as the Dolphins. Personally, I'm a bigger fan of Banks. Similar to Campbell, there's been talks of him bumping inside. I kind of like that versatility where we could play him at tackle. We don't like that. Bump him into guard, or he would literally start at either guard right now. So I think Kelvin Banks is the pick here.
I couldn't agree more, dude. This is a spot where, listen, we're going to talk about on our show a lot that we like to fill needs in free agency so that you don't have to draft for need. That's just kind of how me and Dakota think philosophy-wise. But your tackle situation is so poor for Miami that you like Dakota said, your hands are tied. You have to take the best offensive tackle available. And unfortunately for Miami, it's not a very good offensive tackle class. But ultimately, I think Kelvin Banks still has a lot of potential. And as Dakota said, he also has a ton of versatility. So, yeah, man, I like that pick. And you really don't have a choice.
No, and it's 100% that. Our entire Tua has also been injured a ton, and the guy's getting hit too much. He doesn't help himself with that. A lot of his injuries have been from him scrambling and just head first into an impact. But the interior offensive line of this class is a lot more interesting. Trevor's a bit lower on them than consensus, but looking at Tyler Booker, I guess he has Gray Zabel listed as a tackle, where I think the consensus more has him playing guard immediately. Yeah. So he would probably be the best available, but man, ranked 28th, and he's 28th actually on the consensus as well. So I think Kelvin Banks Jr., tackle out of Texas, could play at tackle, could bump him inside, but he helps the offensive line immediately.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty chalky pick, and it'll likely happen
Yeah.
on draft night. Um, so next up, my Colts. I am a Colts fan because of the great Peyton Manning behind me. Became a Colts fan because he was a volunteer, so and stuck with it. Unfortunately, it's been all downhill since Peyton. But we got the 14th pick, which we also had last year. So, and honestly, it's felt pretty bad as a Colts fan because I know what we're gonna go with. We're gonna go with a tight end. That's where we're getting mocked in pretty much every mock draft you see. And it feels bad because Brock Bowers was drafted 13th last year. If we could have traded up one single pick, we could have had Brock Bowers in last year's draft. Which, listen, I mean, it's you can't compare between the drafts, like we've already talked about that, but it's pretty hard not to when we were in a legitimate position to draft a top 5 tight end currently in the NFL. I mean, he was the best tight end in the league last year. But instead, we're stuck picking between Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland, which are two good players, just not at that. They're not elite level tight end prospects. Some people view Tyler Warren that way, though. Like if you look at the consensus, he is pretty high up on the consensus. He's ninth on the consensus big board, which I could see. It might be a little high for me personally, but I think Tyler Warren's going to be the pick, man. I mean, that's the most obvious need for the Colts. We've needed a really good tight end. It's kind of just been, honestly, like taking big athletic dudes and hoping one of them works out, and really none of them have. So yeah, and I think Tyler Warren, he's a good blocker and a good receiving tight end, which you just don't see a lot in the NFL. So yeah, I think I like taking that at pick 14.
I like that. I think I would agree. I think I'm a little bit not I wouldn't say lower on the tight end class, but it is again when you do the comparison things, like I don't know if he's quite on the same tier as Brock Bowers. And we got exposed to him a lot as Falls fans where we played against him a couple times and just in the SEC in general, watching him play, and he was consistently like the best guy on the field. But I think, having a security blanket like that, who also, all things considered of having a tight end, a guy that can literally take snaps out of the backfield, play a little running back, basically like a better version of Taysom Hill, is really fascinating to pair where they are. I think that makes your offense a little bit more versatile. So I think that's an interesting fit there.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I mean I think Shane Steichen will find ways to utilize Tyler Warren creatively, probably more creatively than they did at Penn State. Um, and I think you add Tyler Warren to this offense with Michael Pittman and A.D. Mitchell and Josh Downs in the slot, like all of a sudden it becomes a pretty interesting offense. The big question mark will be quarterback going forward, but they're kind of banking on, they want AR to win the competition. Let's be clear on that.
Right.
They say they don't, but they
Yeah.
do. They want AR to win the competition, and they're kind of banking on him just getting a whole lot better. And that's a good way to try to make them better. Just keep loading up the offense with weapons. So.
All right, Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State to the Colts at 14. All right, now as the Falcons GM, I'm sprinting to the podium because the guy has arguably fell, and Jalen Walker right now
obvious pick.
is feeling really good. For my head coach Raheem Morris and his defensive scheme, and they just brought in Jeff Ulbrich, I think they would try to maximize him. The Falcons have been getting mocked edge rushers for like the last decade, it feels like, since they got Vic Beasley a while back and he was just okay. It is very much Falcons like too to take a guy who may be a bit raw as an edge rusher, where he only has like one season. He's kind of split his time as an edge rusher and off the ball linebacker, but I think that fits really well in Morris' scheme. I think they could get versatility out of him, get him sub packages in there where you have him rushing from the interior, in that kind of mid blitz style. But I think if you're the Falcons and Jalen Walker's on the board here, you're sprinting to the podium.
I totally agree with that, man. It's an obvious need, but it also is the best player available right now. So if you're in that position, then I think you have to sprint to the podium. It's also a really good scheme fit. And yeah, dude, I think the Falcons, like, if they get Jalen Walker in the first round as Falcons fans, you have to be thrilled with that.
And he is, in terms of the drop, on the consensus, he's 10th. Obviously, we talked on PFF has him a lot lower. Consensus, he's 10th, so he has technically slid here a bit. But yeah, Jalen Walker, edge. Yeah, we're gonna start him at edge, so we'll call him that. Jalen Walker, edge rusher from Georgia, but we'll have some sub packages for him to the Falcons at 15.
All right.
The Arizona Cardinals.
The Cardinals are on the clock, and a lot of interesting options for the Cardinals. The Cardinals could go a lot of different directions, but obviously people have been mocking them defensive line a lot because they desperately need defensive line. But I also think they're a sneaky receiver team. I don't hate a potential Luther Burden or Matthew Golden pick here for Kyler Murray in the offense, but I'm gonna lean towards the defensive line as well. I mean, listen, it's hard not to see a team like the Eagles do what they did last year in the postseason and say, hey, we have to start loading up on potential defensive linemen. And from my perspective, dude, what I'm looking at as far as the defensive line available, I like Donovan Ezaraku out of Boston College, man. I think that's the best edge available. I really like the fit for the Cardinals. And they potentially can finally figure out edge rusher, which they really haven't been able to do.
I like it. Yeah, I definitely think edge. D-line is the solution here. I think the Cardinals desperately need that. I think it is the pick no matter what. It's just a matter of what you like in it. So you like him over, I know he's lower on here, but you like him over Mikael Williams here?
I do, man. I think Mikael Williams just hasn't shown enough as a pass rusher in particular. He's better against the run than he is against the pass. And he does have good tools, but I think Donovan Ezaraku has more tools as far as a pass rusher is concerned, like pass rush moves and things of that nature. So yeah, I think I would go Donovan Ezaraku over Mikael.
All right. So Donovan Ezaraku, edge rusher out of Boston College, 16th to the Cardinals. And now with the Bengals on, we'll do a quick recap of the first half here. Halfway through. So we had Cam Ward, quarterback, Miami, going to the Titans. Travis Hunter, corner/wide receiver to the Browns at 2. Abdul Carter, edge rusher from Penn State to the Giants at 3. Will Campbell, tackle from LSU to the Patriots at 4. Mason Graham, D lineman from Michigan to the Jags at 5. First trade of the draft, Bears move up from 10 to 6 to grab Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State. Jets go tackle Amar Minbu from Missouri at 7. Panthers take Mike Green, edge rusher from Marshall. Saints go Tedorola McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona at 9. And then with the pick, they traded back to the Raiders at 10, get Jahdae Barron, corner from Texas. 49ers go D lineman Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. Cowboys edge rusher James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. Dolphins at 13 take Kelvin Banks Jr., tackle out of Texas. Colts take Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State at 14. Falcons go Jalen Walker, edge rusher out of Georgia at 15. And then the Cardinals go Donovan Ezaraku, edge rusher out of Boston College at 16. Now the Bengals are on the clock.
The Bengals are on the clock.
So we're going to do the exact same thing that the Cardinals did, and we're looking at the D-line. We have swung and we have missed. They need a guard. They could use a starting guard, but the interior, I've not seen Tyler Booker here a lot. That could be something that happens if they feel like they want to reinforce the O-line more, but I personally not doing that.
Yeah.
Now that the edge rushers have come off in an interesting order, I'm sitting here looking at my depth chart, and we took Miles Murphy a couple years ago. He's been, okay. Trey Hendrickson is still completely up in the air.
Yep.
Literally no idea what's happening there. So now, this is a tough spot.
And you still need a guy beside him anyways. Whether you can lock up Hendrickson or not, you still need a guy rushing on the other end because Murphy has not worked out whatsoever. But like you said, you could be without you could be without anyone. So it feels like the edge is just where they're going to look at. They could look interior as well, but
It's tough. I'm torn because a part of me, I do like Kenneth Grant here. I think Kenneth Grant's a solid pick, but
I do.
he's definitely nowhere near as good of a pass rusher as the two interior guys that have gone before him. And at the end of the day, that's more of what the Bengals need. I think this is tough because I am not a fan of Shamar Stewart. I'm just not. I may take him later, but at 17 feels rough. So I think the pick for me is get a guy who at least showed more in college and was a little bit better and can also stop the run. And I think Mikael Williams is the pick here at 17.
Okay. So this is interesting, dude. Edge rushers are flying off the board.
Yeah.
I think that's just
third straight. Yeah.
It speaks to our mindset where we're at in the NFL right now. I think having elite pass rush is so important, dude. I mean, it's been important for so long, but it feels like more than ever. Also having athletic dudes that can stop the mobile quarterback in this day and age, dude. Like guys like Jaden who can run, having a guy on the edge that can track them down. So yeah, I like Mikael here. Also wouldn't have minded to see them go corner either. Will Johnson on the board, I really wouldn't have minded that either. So
that is a really good point. I think that's a solid option here. Again, this is like some of these situations where these teams, and as the GM that has been pushed into this situation, I didn't create the situation.
True.
Right? We just became the GM today.
Yeah.
And they created a situation where we have to draft for need more than I would like the Dolphins were in.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good shout, though. Will Johnson here would be really interesting at this pick. But I think I'm going to go Mikael. And just again, to touch on, Mikael's 15th on the big board, so his 38th rank. Don't let that,
no, definitely not. For some reason, and also for some context, and we keep saying Trevor works at PFF, Trevor Sikkema ranks these guys. He's the only one who touches this big board. He's also a Florida fan, so he might legitimately just hate Georgia players and just rank them lower because for having Jalen Walker in the 25 and Mikael Williams at 38. What? How is that possible? Don't know. But yeah, I like Mikael Williams here.
All right, so Mikael Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia to the Bengals at 17. Now I want to propose a trade.
Ooh, okay. Okay.
Let's hear it. Here it is. So the Steelers, they had Kenny Pickett fall in their lap, probably because no one else wanted him. I think most people would agree that Shedeur is a better prospect than Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
And I think at this point in the draft, they're starting to get nervous, and we're starting to hear calls. We're hearing rumblings that the Browns, the Giants, other teams are getting on the phone to try to move back into the first to stop Shedeur's fall. So we want to prevent that, move up just 3 spots. We're limited on draft capital, as we talked about, so this isn't as far of a jump. I would like to trade to pick 18.
So I love this as a potential option because you're 100% correct. You're not just worried about the teams picking before the Steelers. That's what people got to understand. You're also worried about teams like Dakota mentioned, the Browns, the Giants, who want to come back into the first round and take Shedeur Sanders. And the Saints, exactly. And also the Seahawks are a really good trade option because they have multiple second-round picks this year. Now, the Steelers just traded for the Seahawks second-round pick with DK Metcalf, or traded away their second-round pick to them, but they're going to get it right back. I accept the trade.
All right, so I'll just force this. We're not going to deal with the dealings of it. But Seahawks getting some capital, Steelers moving up, forced to trade, and then I guess we'll still pick for our teams that were allotted at these slots. Now we're making it slightly awkward, but Steelers are moving up. So I'll make this pick. I guess I'll make 3 straight picks, and then you'll make 3 straight picks now.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so we just talked about it. We're moving up. We got to get Shedeur. Aaron Rodgers has retired, or he's in a villa in the middle of some country no one's ever heard of, huffing random herbs and spices. I don't know. But we need a quarterback. And we have a roster that is still very, very good. And I think we go get the guy, prevent his fall. 45th on this board. He is, what is he on the consensus? 6th, which I think both of those are extreme. I think he would fall somewhere in the middle, closer to this range, like 18 to 28-ish, roughly. But yeah, Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado. The potential fall has ended. He is a Pittsburgh Steeler.
And yeah, it's I listen. You have to do it. It's like we just talked about how you don't want to put yourself in a position where you have to draft a need. Well, you put yourself in a position where you have to draft a need at the most important position in the NFL. So there's literally no other option. And the Steelers are not a team that is not looking to be competitive. Mike Tomlin wants to be competitive every year, and he knows Mason Rudolph is not like that's not a competitive starter. He's just not. So you have you if you don't get Aaron Rodgers, you literally, and it's not like a crazy thing to say, you have to draft a quarterback with this first pick because as we mentioned, the Steelers do not have a second round pick. Now that makes it rough trading because they're lacking draft
Yeah, it does.
capital, but they have to make it happen. So I like it, man. I like Shadur at 18 there.
Yeah, and again, one thing I didn't touch on earlier with why I kind of like him, and then throwing velocity and all that stuff. Steve and Sam have talked about that on the Check the Mike pod. We referenced a good bit. I don't think his arm's not a concern at all. Pittsburgh would be an interesting place to have to play at. That's kind of like what if I did go with him at the Saints at 9, putting him in a dome. You never have to worry about it again. But I just think you don't worry about it. You take him. He's your guy. You don't have a second round pick, so it was either this. You could have waited till 21, but it was either this or you draft a guy in the third, and you may have to start him or Mason Rudolph. So Bucks are on the clock now at 19, and I love a certain fit here. So one thing I'm going to say is that you and I both do not value linebackers a ton. Compare, and the NFL is also like that. But ironically, the Bucks are one of those teams. But the history of drafting linebackers in the first round over the past few years has not been great. You
It
had
has
Jordan
not.
Brooks with the Seahawks. He's on a different team now. You had Devin White with the Bucks, 5th overall, on a different team now. And then even like Devin Bush. I mean, you've had consistent linebackers that just did not pan out. And this has been a common mock here of Jihad Campbell to the Bucks. It is a need. Levante David is pretty much all they got, and he's getting old. But as the Bucks GM, I am stopping the fall of another guy, and I love Will Johnson right here.
Ooh, I love it. Listen, I think in this situation, Will Johnson might be the best available player. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at the players left, and I think I would have Will Johnson, maybe Malachi Starks, but again,
Yeah.
you're taking positional value into account, which you kind of have to do, to a certain extent. And if Will Johnson hits his high end, then dude, you could have one of the best corners in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. He coming off of an awkward season with some injuries and stuff, but his high end play, he looked like the best corner in football for a long time in college. So Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan, to the Bucks at 19.
I like it, man. I
All
do.
right, now Broncos on the clock at 20 with 3 straight picks for you
This is
with the
one
trade back
of
situation.
this is one of the easiest picks I've had in a minute. I want Luther Burden here, dude. Luther Burden paired with
Oh,
Sean Payton and Bo Nix. It's first of all, it's a skill set they need. They need pass catchers. And I think Sean Payton could do so much with Luther Burden. I keep seeing them get running backs and tight ends. And they're like, well, they need offensive weapons. Well, if you're going to get an offensive weapon, why not get it at the most valuable position at receiver? I also think you could argue that Luther Burden is the best offensive player available right now in the draft. So that's an easy one for me, man. Luther Burden.
I love that. I absolutely love this fit. This was like something I saw a lot more early on in mocks and then just started to fade away with them taking running backs and everything. I love that because Cortland Sutton is your big physical guy. You got Troy Franklin to just run in a straight line for the most part, but getting a guy like this that can catch the ball and do things after, like he has like his broken tackle rate and how many broken tackles and forced missed tackles he had is like running back level stats. He is dynamic. Getting Bo Nix, a guy like that, to open up that pass game would be awesome.
Especially with a creative guy like Sean Payton
Oh
that
yeah.
will find ways to get Luther Burden the ball. So yeah, I love that.
Love it. So Luther Burden, the third wide receiver in Missouri, goes to the Broncos at 20.
Now,
Seahawks on the clock after trading back.
correct. The Seattle Seahawks are on the clock, and there are a lot of options. And we just talked about how we don't like drafting linebacker, but I won't lie, Jihad Campbell is very tempting because I could definitely see McDonald
Mm.
wanting a guy like Jihad Campbell, but I'm also trying to be the GM in this spot. Um, Let me pull up the Seahawks lineup here. Um, Man, See, they could use edge, but the problem is all of the edge rushers are gone. We literally just basically took all the best available edge rushers off the board. Um,
Just leaves you the physical specimen Shamar Stewart really, and then a lot of
I
guys who are
know.
typically in the second round. Yeah,
I know. Man, that is tough. I think you could make an argument here that Jihad Campbell is one of the best players available. There's also, I don't know if I believe this, but some people believe that he could come off the edge and he can pass rush a little bit. I don't know if I necessarily buy into that. Um, but man, I think Mike McDonald could do a lot with Jihad Campbell. And yes, linebackers in the first round, you make a great point, dude. They have not worked out of recently. But you also have to just listen to the board, right? I mean, like all the edge rushers I would have potentially taken for this Seahawks were gone. That's one of the reasons I decided to trade back and pick up more draft capital. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go best player available, a great fit. Yes, a less valuable position, but I mean, again, you look at this consensus board. Jihad Campbell's, well, he's actually 19th on the consensus. I actually kind of thought he was higher, but still, I think that's a solid
yeah,
pick for them.
that's still really good value. And being in that position where, again, assuming off what's happening behind the room, there's a solid chance McDonald loves him. And if they were able to trade back from 18 and him pass on the Bucks, who gets sparked him a lot, I think they would be really happy about that. So I think
Yeah.
he's going to be an immediate player that makes a difference for them, and arguably the best at his position in the draft. So it's always a good feeling, even if it's not as valuable of a position. It always feels pretty good to leave the draft with the highest rated player at a certain position.
It does. It does. Now we have the Chargers. I'm also picking for the Chargers. And I actually love this spot for the Chargers. There's so many options for them here. A lot of people have them taking Hampton. I just, again, I don't love that. I don't hate running backs. It's not that. But I think at the end of the day, dude, if you have a receiver need and you have a running back need and you decide to draft the running back over the receiver need, I think that's just a mistake. I do. I
And they
don't think
also
there's.
they did sign Najee as well,
Oh yeah, that's
which
right. They did sign Najee, which
which
once you sign him, I mean, you're not drafting a guy. You're just not doing that. Um, so it's really between receiver and tight end. And I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, Harbaugh's going to take the Michigan guy and Colson Loveland. I could see it happening. I could. I could also see them taking Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant's here. He's not always here. They could use interior linemen, but I just think you have, after last year taking Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors, I think you have to draft Justin Herbert a weapon. And I think in this draft, the guy available I want is Matthew Golden, dude. Matthew Golden is a great player. Gives Herbert a weapon. So yeah, I'm going Matthew Golden.
I like the pick. Yeah, I think Johnston has been okay. That pick was a little rough at the time, and sometimes you have to admit you missed and just take another shot at it. And Herbert needs some help, man. They were a good team last year, but that receiver core is just not getting it done. So I like this fit. I think he'll immediately be an impact player for them.
Yeah, I think he also fits really well with Lad McConkey as well. I mean, Lad
Yeah, yeah.
McConkey and Matthew Golden. And they also brought back Mike Williams. Like all of a sudden, that receiving core is looking a lot better when you add a guy like Matthew Golden to it.
Yeah, that speed, especially with McConkey's underneath ability, is a pretty good combo. All right, so Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas, to the Chargers at 22.
And you're finally picking
Here's
again.
an interesting pick for the Packers. There's a lot of things. I'm feeling bad that Will Campbell went, or sorry, Will Johnson went. I would have loved to have seen him fall here, because one thing we're having to weigh here is what happens to Jair Alexander. To be honest, if I am the GM, I'm probably trading him. I think that's probably what ends up happening most likely. The cornerback, depth here is feeling a little rough. So you may be in trade back territory for somebody trying to move up for a position of a guy who's fallen a little bit, like Malachi Starks or honestly Kenneth Grant, somebody wanting a tackle. This is a little bit of a tough spot. I do think receiver is important, and I think they could use receiver help. I don't love Emeka Ibuka this high personally.
Same.
I just don't care for that at this point. I
Well,
think.
Because the Packers need that true X, right? That's what they've been looking for. They've been looking for that true number one receiver, and Emeka Ibuka is never gonna get to that point. I mean, he could be a great NFL player, but he just, I mean, he wasn't an X in college. So what makes you think he's gonna do that in the NFL?
Yeah. I think, oh man, I just don't think, I think I'm in a position where I don't think we have a glaring need that makes me want to force a position here. And a part of me, we could use a tackle as well. We drafted Jordan Morgan. He's not looking great, but I don't think the O line is desperate necessarily. Left tackle's a bit rough. Um, I guess the O line is in a little rough state. So I mean, we could go tackle here um, with Josh Simmons, but to be honest, my gut as the GM here is I think I'm going to take the best guy available because he could immediately pencil in next to Xavier McKinney at safety, and I
Ooh.
think I'm going to go Malachi Starks.
This is not a pick I've seen a lot, but I absolutely love it too because Malachi Starks is definitely one of the best players in this draft. Um, where is he at on the big board? Let's see.
He's 21st, so it's about in his
21st.
range.
Yeah, that's about in his range, but I think he's probably 21st because of the positional value. There's
Yeah,
not a ton of positional value there, but I also think the Packers in this scenario would be kind of upset that all the edges are gone. Now, in
yeah,
real life, if Dakota's not the GM, they're probably looking at Shamar Stewart and saying, "Wow,
probably.
we have the athletic freak." I mean, they've kind of already hit on that as well, right? They took Rashawn Gary a couple years ago in the first
True.
round. Very similar prospect. Lack production in college, but athletic freaky traits. And so I think they would love a guy like Shamar Stewart in real life. But I agree with you. I think Malachi Starks is such a safe pick, man. I think he can do a lot of different things. Some people are saying he could even play in the slot as a
Yeah,
cornerback. So yeah, I love that pick.
yeah. I think he's got some really good man coverage ability, which is unique from a safety. So you can use him a little bit differently than like a traditional free. Uh, and yeah, with Shamar again, I would think about it here because I think the edge is something we could go with, but I just don't think our need is enough. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of guys who weren't productive and like he just does not hit on any of the marks that translates to the NFL. Edge is one of the easier things to forecast in terms of what they're going to be at the next level, and he just doesn't fit those boxes. So we'll take the best player available. We have a roster that's kind of designed for that too, and we'll go Malachi Stark, safety out of Georgia.
Yeah,
Puts the
you
Vikings on the clock.
Yep. And you make a really good point about Shamar Stewart and what traits translate and how positions translate. And yeah, pass rusher is one of those positions that lack of production in college usually does not translate to the NFL level. There are very few examples of it happening. It's very rarely happens in the first round though. But in this range, I do think teams should probably start considering Shamar Stewart. But the Vikings, man, I'm probably running this card in here, right? Kenneth Grant, give
Yeah, I
me
love it.
defensive interior, best player available. When a need fits best player available, I mean it's perfect, right? So yeah, man, give me Kenneth Grant. Listen, dude, this guy's an absolute freak. Huge, moves really well for his size. So and again, they really kind of desperately need defensive interior. So I think they'd be really happy with that pick.
I love that. Absolutely love this fit. I was debating him at 23, and you can never have too much depth, but like with the interior that the Packers have, like they could take him, but he's not going to probably be a starter immediately. But with the Vikings, absolutely love this fit. He is a day one starter. They need help on the interior. I love that pick. Pair him with your first round pick from last year at Dallas Turner too. You get that young D line going. I love this pick.
Yep.
All right, Kenneth Grant, D line, Michigan.
All right.
All right, Texans.
Texans.
This is another one where I'm probably just going to sprint to the podium. Not that I'm even like happy about it, but just that we have to draft an offensive lineman. And tackle is just more valuable. You lost. We traded. I didn't do it. We traded. Laramie Tunsil.
I
They
didn't
did
do
sign
it.
Cam Robinson, who will probably start at left tackle. Uh, Oh man, you know what pick I like here? I was thinking Josh Simmons, but I'm actually going to change my mind here.
You're
I'm
gonna go
going to change my
Connerly.
mind. No, I'm going Gray Zabel. I think Gray Zabel
Oh, okay.
maybe because I kind of want to plug him on the interior immediately, with the opportunity to play him at tackle if I needed to.
Hmm,
Um,
I like it.
oh, it's tough.
I
This is tough, but I kind of like that. I like the Gray Zabel play. I like the
okay.
let's just see what we can do with him because we could use him pretty much anywhere. So let's just see where he fits because he played all positions at the Senior Bowl and looked pretty good at every single one of them as well. So
Here's the thing for a team that just needs a better offensive line, like Stroud was under so much pressure last year, and they just looked lost at times as an offensive line. Any guy who has some positional versatility like Gray Zabel, I think is a good pick. And he's going to fill a starting position. So, and that's what
yeah,
they need right now. They just need to get better at offensive line. So any guy on the O line would probably work.
and he may be a little bit lower on the consensus. Now he's at 28, so
That's right in line.
he's still ahead. He's still ahead of Tyler Booker, so it's kind of in line. But Josh Simmons is a more true tackle. He's one of the more true tackles in the entire class, but especially in the first round. But Gray Zabel, North Dakota State offensive lineman, because we're going to play him wherever we want. So let's go. Got to protect our young franchise quarterback.
The Rams are on the clock, and it's an interesting pick for the Rams. I think they wouldn't be mad that Josh Simmons is available here. I think they'd probably look at that. I'm also looking at Colson Loveland.
Yeah,
I don't think Tyler Higbee's going to stop me from drafting a tight end whatsoever. So yeah, it's tough, man. They have a lot of interesting options here. I also think Shamar Stewart is a potential option as well. I'm looking at Shamar Stewart at this point. Now, you did just get Jared Verse, obviously, last year. Jared Verse had Rookie of the Year. So you're kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say, see, I'm a Vol fan. So I'm seeing Byron Young on the depth chart, and I'm saying they're set at edge. It's fine. But Byron Young is, I mean, I don't think Byron Young's going to stop me from drafting a guy if I think he's worth the pick. Um, but as the GM, because that's the exercise, as the GM, I'm gonna take Colson Loveland, man. Give me another pass catcher for
man.
Matthew Stafford. And yeah, dude, I just love the fit. They need a tight end. Like Tyler Higbee, he's like a lot of tight ends in the NFL, right? He's just solid. Like there's a lot of just solid tight ends around in the NFL right now, but Colson Loveland could be great.
I like that. I think you have Matt Stafford for a short amount of time left for him, and giving him more weapons to try to do something with him now, I think makes a ton of sense. I'm a little hurt because I was looking ahead and I've not seen this mocked a ton because he usually doesn't make it this far. Kelson's usually gone by the Chargers, but I was thinking
The
him at
Commanders.
29
The
was
Commanders.
looking good,
Yeah,
man. We have
yep,
Zach Ertz on the depth chart, who's 40 years old, and then nothing.
yep.
And having that with Jay Daniels, I would have loved that fit. But yeah, I think this is good value at this point as well. He has him at 26. Consensus board has him at 18. So that's some really good value getting him at 26 to pair with Matt Stafford for the little bit of time you have him left.
Yeah, man, the Rams have a really good depth chart. Like I'm just looking up and down the depth chart. They don't
Yeah.
have a lot of needs. Like they just don't. But now you have Devontae Adams, Puka Nakua, and Colson Loveland with Matthew Stafford, who, listen, you surround Matthew Stafford with elite weaponry, he can be an elite quarterback. He's not consistently elite, but he can have elite seasons. So yeah, dude, I love that pick. But the Commanders and Loveland is interesting, dude. I've done that a lot off stream, just mock drafting because it's draft season, man. That's what I love to do, mock drafting. But yeah, if Loveland falls for the Commanders, I would absolutely love that.
I doubt it's going to happen too. I do think he's probably going to go before that. But I like this pick. So Colston Loveland, tied in Michigan to the Rams at 26. And now the Ravens are on the clock. This is an interesting one because I feel like a lot of we're starting to reach that point where a lot of guys, I probably, a couple of these guys probably wouldn't be first round guys necessarily for me. Um, and the Ravens have a pretty solid just overall roster. Um, I think, you know, the interior of their offensive line is looking a little rough right now. Um, defensive wise, I could see Shamar Stewart here. I could definitely go
Ooh,
edge rusher here, and I think that'd be a very interesting one for for them. Um,
I do. Just speaking on the Shamar Stewart pick, a team like the Ravens, who I'm not going to say you really can never afford to just burn a first round pick. But listen, this is a stacked roster, right? They have a really good team, and I think taking a chance on a guy like that who has a ton of upside, right? We've already talked about how we're worried about his lack of production, but the upside is there. So I actually kind of like that risk as a team that doesn't have a lot of needs to fill.
yeah, I think the two guys I'm debating here, in terms of the value and whatnot, is Tyler Booker, taking who's considered the best interior,
For
one
the
of the better
need.
like true guard. Yeah, and he's 47th on this, but he is 20. Where's he at? He's 30th. So
You
I mean, this is
screwed
about his
yourself.
range.
You screwed yourself by taking Gray Zabel with the
I
Texans.
know,
Because
I
Gray
really
Zabel
did.
with the Ravens would have been fantastic.
I think this is tough because I'm also thinking ahead of either teams a little bit as well. But I do think, I think protecting Lamar is important. I don't know if the offensive line isn't that bad of state. Our two guards are looking not ideal, but I think the value here we are, to your point, being in a team like the Ravens. I've got my hat on. We're going to be fine. We are a good roster. We're good. We can afford to take swings on guys more. So I do think I like Shamar Stewart here. Finally gets
I
off the
like
board. He'll
it.
probably be gone before then in real life, but I think this is a pretty good fit for him.
Listen, even though we are worried about the production, I think you still have to take a shot on a guy like that at the end of the first round because he's going to a good team with good players around him. And the upside can be great, right? He is extremely athletic. And I also think he has a little higher of a floor because he's solid against the run, which gives him a little bit of value. So, yeah, I love Shamar Stewart to the Ravens here, dude. I think they would be really happy with that.
Oh yeah. So Shamar Stewart edge at A&M goes to the Ravens at 27, which puts the Detroit Lions on the clock.
The
28.
old Lions, man. This is interesting, dude. They're all interesting from here because you're getting into these teams that don't have a lot of needs. They're really good teams, um, but there's still solid players left. Um, man, this is a tough one. I'm looking
You would have
at
loved to have seen Shamar still be on the board there.
the yes, I would have absolutely loved that. And I would have loved Gray Zabel here too, man. They need a guard. They need that's a need for them. He also would have been one of the best players available. Also don't hate corner for them. I know they just took two swings at corner last year. And they're still young, so I don't know if they're going to be bailing on those young players yet. Um, you also I think receiver is a possibility for them, right? I don't hate Emeka Ibuka here, man. I really don't. I think at this point he's pretty good value. Also don't hate Jaden Higgins here from Iowa State
Mm.
for the Lions. And I'm kind of leaning that way, to be honest with you. Um, man, there's just not none of those edge rushers are left. That's the problem, dude. I would have loved one of those edge rushers, and Dakota kind of just took the last guy. So this might just be kind of something that people don't see a lot, but I'm gonna go Jaden Higgins, Iowa, Iowa State for the Lions because listen, dude, they could use receiver, and they already paid Amon Ross St. Brown, and who knows if they're even gonna pay Jamison Williams, and again, they could still use a third guy anyway. So yeah, give me Jaden Higgins.
I like it. I like it. I do think we both are a bit higher on Jaden Higgins than probably the consensus. And who knows where he ends up going. I think this is an interesting fit. I think this would also be Lions would probably be a prime trade down candidate right here for anybody wanting to move back into the first for
Good point.
Jackson Dart or whatever. Um, but I think if they stay put, I do think with the way the draft has fallen, I think going wide receiver, building a little bit more security around Jared Goff makes sense.
I actually really like that shout about trading down because in this spot you have the Browns and Giants there, probably eyeing up Jackson Dart. Right, those are two teams that want to take a young quarterback, and you wouldn't be trading up that far at this point, right? This is like just a handful of picks to trade up, and Jaden Higgins would probably be there for the Lions at the top of the second round. So if they like a guy like that, I could definitely see the trade down.
All right, so Jaden Higgins, wide receiver, Iowa State, to the Lions at 28.
I like
And
it.
now the Commanders are on the board. Oh, this is another interesting spot. I do think they would also be a prime trade down right now as well, with the way the board has fallen. Am I going to do it? I'm not going to do it, am I?
They would
I could.
probably. They would.
Yeah, they probably would. I don't know if I'm gonna, but
It's
they
fine.
probably would.
That's very
What
fair.
I'm gonna do, man, edge again. If the edge rushers, I don't feel great about the rest of the edge rushers here. I feel like Scourton you could go with here at 29. That's probably decent value for him. Um, I don't hate that. They could still use the edge rush pretty badly.
How
And
do
to be
you
honest, they maybe.
how do you feel about Landon Jackson?
I think I would take him. I think Landon Jackson and him both would be solid options here. I'm wondering what, with the minimal picks that they have after trading for guys, in terms of need, I may be forced to do it because a part of me wanted to go. My gut is telling me Tyler Booker. My gut is telling
Okay.
me fill in one of our guards. Our guards are not good, and we need to
Yeah.
protect Jaden Daniels.
Ooh.
But edge rush is such a need for us right now that with how many picks do they have?
What's the chances of Josh Simmons moving to right tackle? Is there no chance of that happening? Because they could draft him and move him to right tackle to have Laramie Tunsil and Josh Simmons on that offensive line.
I don't hate that. That's definitely something. I don't know.
Or
They could
Connerly.
use the tackle. Yeah, that's actually a good shot too. Man, this is a tough position because, like, to be honest, it's kind of one of those ones where you can't really go wrong. It's just a matter of what you end up deciding to do. Man,
Dude, I was looking. I don't think Jack Sawyer is a first round player, but I was just trying to find him on here for edge rushers. Trevor has him ranked at 92. That seems a little bit low, in my opinion. I know Jack Sawyer's not like a big athletic guy or whatever, but man, he can play.
that's kind of crazy. Yeah, consensus says 58.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
wow. Oh man. We only have 5 draft picks, so we are in tough spot
you
where
kind of need a starter. That's the thing.
that's the thing, and we need to fix our man. Let me see. Just thinking ahead here, man. The edge class is pretty deep.
It is,
What
dude.
picks
Though
do we have? We do have our second, so I think value wise, I like that. Mhm.
don't screw Dakota, the GM of the Chiefs, by the way.
That's literally what I'm thinking, and I think I might just have to screw myself because I was sitting there thinking, man, Josh Simmons at 31 feels really good.
exactly. The Chiefs would
But
love Josh Simmons at 31.
But man, if this fell this way, it's kind
What
of
about
hard
a
to see them
trade?
not taking him.
What about a trade? Did the Chiefs listen? I could definitely
Ooh,
see in this scenario, Josh Simmons is on the
I like
board,
that.
right?
I
And
like that.
the Commanders need more draft capital. The Chiefs move up 2 spots to guarantee Josh Simmons. Let's
I
cook up a
absolutely
trade.
love it. Let's do it. I absolutely love that because they do, and it's tougher for me. And now it lets me have another pick come off the board to make my decision as the Commanders GM.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's do it. So they're going to move up to get the tackle who has slipped a bit. Make sure it's good. Yep. All right. So Chiefs move up to take tackle Josh Simmons,
I like it.
which they desperately need. Now their line has been a bit dismantled between the trades and losing guys at free agency. So Josh Simmons tackle Iowa State. Chiefs move up to get their guy.
In the mock draft simulator that I'm doing along with us, that's one of the suggested trades is the Chiefs moving up with the Commanders.
Really?
So, yep.
I love that.
All right. So the Chiefs take
Bills.
Josh Simmons, which honestly probably doesn't impact my pick here with the Bills. I would have loved to see some of those edge rushers still on the board, but
Yeah.
that's just that. I think that's what's going to happen. Likely, honestly, I mean these edge rushers are going to go pretty quick, in my opinion. Man, dude, I just don't like the receiver core, but I don't think they're going to go receiver. I think, frankly, what I could see the Bills doing, looking at this depth chart and a player that is low on the PFF board, but will probably go in the first round, is Nick Emenwari from
Mm-mm.
South Carolina. He is super low on Trevor's board. I cannot believe how low Trevor is on him, but he's an athletic freak. And the Bills really need safety. Like, I know the DeMar Hamlin story is great and all, but he's not an elite NFL starter at this point. That's one of their biggest holes on defense. So I think I'm gonna go in Nwari. I could also see corner from them. Trey Amos or Siobhan Ravel. Oh man, I might switch it up. Have you chose it yet? You have not. I think I'm gonna
Yeah.
switch it up last minute here because I'm the GM, right? I get to make the shot. I'm calling the shots here. I'm calling the shots. I'm gonna go Siobhan Ravel. Actually, I'm switching it up. Siobhan Ravel, more valuable position, and also arguably, I mean, in my opinion, probably a better player. Because Emenwari would be more for the traits over the production.
Yeah.
And I just generally don't like that. And the Bills really need a second cornerback. So yeah, I'm gonna go Siobhan Ravel here.
I love both of those options, to be honest. I like the Emin pick as well. I think it would be a really unique fit for them with, in that defense. I think that would be a solid pick. And they're in a position to do what we talked about before, where you can draft traits guys and take a shot on them. I like that. But I also like going corner instead. I think going corner here makes a lot of sense. And to justify, again, looking at the PFF stuff, Omen is 26th on the big board, and Siobhan Ravel is 37th. So, like, this is definitely the range. You got to keep in mind one thing to think about when guys start drafting players like this. Once you hit probably pick 20 to 25, you're going to start seeing guys go off the board who may be in the 40s, because you got to think about these guys. They have their big board. They have the guys that they like, that they want, and they're not picking again until the back end of the second unless they move up. So if your guy is on the board in the 40s to 50s range, you got to take him when you got to take him. And I like this pick a lot. I do like Siobhan Ravel there.
It's crazy how Trevor impacts this big board too. So part of the thing that is baked in is the PFF board, and the fact that Nick and Mwari is 67 on Trevor's board but 26 on the big board is pretty interesting. But yeah, man, Siobhan Ravel, love the pick for the Bills.
All right, East Carolina corner goes to the Bills at 30. Now the Commanders back on the clock after trading down.
And who are they gonna take?
We've thought about it even more, and I still don't feel great about any option here. Man, now the value of Tyler Booker feels pretty good here, but we did pick up we probably picked up like a fourth maybe from this trade, but we got more depth. You can find offensive linemen later in the draft. I think, in my mind and what I value, I feel good about our offense. Our offense last year, not much changed. Plus, we got Laramie Tunsil and we got Deebo Samuel, so not much got worse. But I feel pretty good about our offense's ability to score. I feel pretty good at what we were able to do last year. Our defense was clearly the weakness. We couldn't stop the Eagles remotely when we got to the playoffs. I think we got to go for a valuable position, and I think Nick Skouerten. I'm going to take Nick Skouerten edge, reinforce the edge, build on that D line.
I love that pick, dude. That's a pick I've done a lot just offline. I could definitely see that. They need defensive line. They threw money at Javon Kinlaw, kind of an interesting, kind of one of the free agency moves that I just didn't love. Throwing money at a guy who just hasn't shown it yet in the NFL. But they still need edge in a big way. That's still a big need for them. I honestly probably would have went Josh Conerly though. Pairing Josh Conerly with Laramie Tunsil, I would have loved that for them, frankly. But I also really like the edge. And who knows, dude? Who knows how these edges are going to go in real life? You could see guys like maybe Mikael Williams being left or James Pierce being left for the Commanders in this spot. So who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, I like that pick.
And I think the other option here, I think putting money into Kinlaw takes. I mean, not saying that when those things happen, because I hate being the absolutist. Because every year a team drafts a guy where we were like, you just signed somebody. Like, why would you do that? You never mock them that, so you just don't do it. But I think Derek Harmon would be in play here as well.
Ooh, yeah.
Interior from Oregon.
Good point.
But I think edge is a bigger need. You did just put money into Kinlaw. Let that play out. So I think Skouerten's the pick here.
I'm I am glad you did not take Derek Harmon because that is very much in consideration for the Philadelphia Eagles here. Um, Man, there's a lot of good players left, but I love defensive interior for the Eagles. And Derek Harmon lower on the PFF board, but a guy we're probably going to see in the first round. Like there are several guys here that are ahead of Derek Harmon that I think most people probably wouldn't agree with. Like even though we love our Vol for Life, Omar Norman Lott, but I would be absolutely floored if Omar Norman Lott goes over Derek Harmon. And the Eagles, dude, they just love taking D linemen, man. That's just what they do. That's their MO. That's how Howie Roseman likes to build the team. So yeah, give me Derek Harmon
I like it.
to
Yeah, I mean
round out the
that D
draft.
line is pretty ridiculous at this point. You've got, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. They did lose Milton Williams, so they lost some of that pass rush that they had that Derek Harmon could step in and help out with immediately.
Exactly.
It is fascinating looking at that roster because, like, you look at their needs on this, and it's like they have arguably one of the best wide receiver duos in football. Um, they have edge rush. Like, they're just such a good roster that you literally are usually just adding depth at whatever position. And like corner too, they just drafted two corners last year who look like studs. So like to say it's a need, like this is just indicative of how well they've built that roster. So I think drafting him, I think it's incredible value for him too. For context, he's 27th on the consensus board. So this would be really good value with Derek Harmon from Oregon.
I like it, man. It's a
All
good
right,
first round.
here we
Solid.
go. Let's see what they think of it. There it is.
There it is.
Fucking boom. There it is. So that's a recap. I won't read through all these again. We'll do the last. Guess we'll breeze through it. Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Will Campbell, Mason Graham, Genty, Membu, Green, McMillan, Jade Barron, Walter Nolan, James Pierce, Kelvin Banks, Tyler Warren, Jalen Walker, Donovan Izaraku finishes out the top 16. And then the back half of Mikael Williams, Shadur Sanders, Will Johnson, Luther Burden, Jihad Campbell, Matthew Golden, Malachi Starks, Kenneth Grant, Gary Zabel, Colston Loveland, Shamar Stewart, Jaden Higgins, Josh Simmons, Siobhan Ravel, and Nick Scourton, and finally Derek Harmon to the Eagles at 32. What all right, quick recap. What stands out to you so far? What are your favorite picks out of this on the
Well,
spot?
one of the things that stands out is I took James Pierce at 12. That's likely not going to happen
Right.
just from the reports we're hearing. But that's personally what I would have done in that situation. Um, it's a lot of there's nothing too crazy. Like Shamar Stewart fell. That's probably not going to happen, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to see Shamar Stewart fall to the Ravens at 27. Jaden Higgins, he's kind of like a fringe first round guy. He likely will go in the second. Not a lot of trades. We didn't end up doing too many trades. But the trades that did happen, I really, really liked. Like I really like the Bears coming up for Ashton Genty. Like you basically guarantee you get a blue chip player and at a position of need. And then the Chiefs coming up for Josh Simmons. That's another guy that probably won't fall to 29, but you never know. That's like one of your points you made earlier, dude. Anything can happen on draft night. Anything can happen. Like
Right.
nothing would really surprise me at this point. I always point to the Michael Penix at 9 to the Falcons at this point because that was one of the most shocking picks and honestly in the NFL draft history. So, you know, anything can happen. So don't be surprised if a guy like Josh Simmons does fall. And the Chiefs trading up for him, very realistic option. So yeah, man, I like it.
Yeah, I think the top 7, I think, is pretty on board with what we see a lot of mocks do. Difference is just Genty going to the Bears instead of the Raiders at 6, but still that spot. Um, I think, yeah, I think the key that stands out to me too that we didn't touch on is American Hampton falls out of the first, which solid chance that also doesn't happen. But we just not wanting to take a running back in the first round of these spots. But I think it'd be interesting too with Shadur going to Pittsburgh. I think that's a solid option, like in terms of just seeing that happen. That he ends up in Pittsburgh, where that happens at will be intriguing to see, and then moving up in this situation. Um, but yeah, I mean, overall, Colston fell a little bit. Shamar will probably be the one of these that's the biggest difference. Like, to be honest, what could probably end up happening is just switching him and like James Pierce, where he
Sure.
goes 12th and James Pierce goes later. That's potentially likely. But overall, hey, yeah, it's a solid mock.
Solid mock. Oh yeah, and I also forgot the Steelers trade too. Steelers trade up like that for Shadur, get their guy. But yeah, man, let us know if you hate what we did with your team. It's our first mock draft, first public mock draft. We've done a ton offline, obviously. And yeah, if you hate what we did to your team, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, just trash us or praise whatever pick you do like. And yeah, so we will be going live on Friday morning, probably around 8-ish on YouTube to kind of do a first round recap. So we'll get our immediate reactions after watching the first round ahead of the second and third round. So join us live that on Friday morning. A video will probably be out sometime before the draft. Second round kicks off that afternoon or that evening. So yeah, and then we will nail down some more consistent scheduling for our content after that. We'll start tackling division by division draft recaps. So we'll go team by team for each division, isolate them that way. So we'll have a consistent schedule for that. So you have that to look forward to. But yeah, any final thoughts?
No, man, I'm ready for the draft, ready to see what happens, the crazy things that happen. Who knows? We may go pick by pick if the draft's that crazy on Friday morning. Yeah, I'm ready for it, man. Let's go.
Appreciate. All right, yeah, it's exciting. Cool. Well, appreciate everybody tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe, hit that button, do all the things that help support us. We really appreciate it, and anybody that tuned in. So yeah,
Until
thanks,
next
guys.
time. Until next time. Thanks for talking ball with us.